Namaskar friends and viewers. Now we are going to discuss objectivity in history writing, that is our topic. I am S.B. Upadhyay from History Faculty, School of Social Sciences, IGNOU. I am going to introduce the concept of objectivity and see how it applies to the writing of history as well as the social sciences in general. Objectivity, you must have heard about it. We generally refer to objectivity in our day to day life, that this view is not objective, this view is subjective. So, the antonym, the opposite of the objective, we generally use as subjective, and we generally take the objective to be true, to be the right approach in social sciences, and that is the foundation on which social sciences in general and history in particular have been built. Here we are going to discuss how this foundation functions, how it arose, how this theory of objectivity came into being, and how its critiques developed over the years. Objectivity is the founding principle of Western historiographical tradition. When I mean the Western historiographical tradition, when I say that, it means that the tradition of history writing which started from ancient Greece. So, it is the Greco-Roman tradition which developed into medieval period in the Western Europe and then into the modern Europe. So, it is basically a European tradition of history writing which focuses, which is based on the principle of objectivity. Other traditions of history writing, for example, Indian tradition, a Chinese tradition, a Arabic tradition, they do not put so much premium on the concept of objectivity. Even in the West, the pre-modern tradition of history writing, although paying its lip service to objectivity, was not objective in the modern sense. And it is important because sciences developed earlier, natural sciences developed earlier. So, it was sought that the humanities, the disciplines like history and other disciplines which were part of the humanity earlier, they were sought to be shifted to the sciences, and thereby they were started to be called social sciences. It was a German historian, Ranke, R-A-N-K-E. He was German historian in the 19th century. It was from him that the modern historiography derives the most from. And it was Wilhelm Ranke who developed the basic principles which we follow till now in the professional history writing. What did he do? What did he say? He said that history as such is the meaning of the history, the meaning of the history writing, the achievement which it should aim to is to show how it really was. That was his precise phrase, to show how it really was. It means that the job of the historian, the task of the historian is to reveal the past as it was without any intervention from his side. Therefore, Ranke for the first time in the historiographical tradition grounded the principle of objectivity in history writing. He said that historian should detach completely from his own moorings, from his own cultural, mental, ideological surroundings, and try to see the past as the people in the past saw themselves. And this is the only way to write history. The past had to be seen in its own terms. Therefore, if someone is writing on ancient India for example. So, one has to understand how the ancient Indians thought about themselves. For that we have to look for, Rank said, we have to look for contemporary sources. Contemporary sources meant that the sources, the material, the books, the records, official records from that period, from those individuals who were concerned with that period, concerned with those happenings, concerned with those events. Therefore, he said that the records which those people left for us, for posterity, for future, those were, if they are contemporary in nature, if they are nearest to the event, they are the records which should be relied upon the most. And these records he called primary sources. Thus, primary sources, which we also till today use in history writing, the primary sources are those sources according to Rank and according to the professional historians since him. Primary sources are those sources which are contemporary with the event, and not only contemporary, they are nearest to the event in spatial terms. So, both in terms of time and space, the records have to be nearest to the events, happenings which happened in the past, and those were the primary sources, and those had to be relied upon the most for writing history, because they give an authentic version of what happened in the past. Now, how to decide upon that? That those sources are original and they are not some later interpolation or manipulation by somebody else. Rank used the philological method of analyzing the records. Philological method means linguistic method. To understand the language of that period, the variation, the nuances in the language, and then decide that these records were left by those people who were nearest to the events or happenings in time and space, those people whose records can be relied upon the most. Now, they are the primary sources, and these primary sources have to be determined by using the methods of linguistic criticism, by determining whether they are genuine sources or not. Now, he said there are other types of sources which can also be relied upon. He called them secondary sources. Thus, the primary sources are those which are nearest to the event. Secondary sources are those which are away from the event, both in time and space. So, person who is writing about a certain event in Calcutta while he himself is in Delhi, so it is a kind of record which, although is contemporary, is nearest in time, is not nearest in the space. The person who is in Delhi has not seen what happened in Calcutta. So, that record can be relied upon so far as time is concerned, but it is a secondary record, because what he is writing is based on somebody else's record. Similarly, a person who is writing about, say, a event which happened about 100 years ago or even 2 years ago, the person has not seen the event, he or she has not witnessed the event. It means he or she is removed from the event in time and space. Thus, his or her version cannot be relied upon completely. Nevertheless, it can be used as a source for writing history. This Rank called as secondary sources. Thus, he established a hierarchy of sources. Sources which are nearest to the event are most, that is the uppermost for the historian. Then those records which are a little removed in time and space, those have to be relied upon less. Nevertheless, they are secondary sources and historians can rely upon that. And therefore, he said that the archival sources are more important for historian than printed sources. because archival sources retain the original flavor of the sources, while printed sources are selections from them, and therefore, they reveal the intention of the selector, and therefore, they may not be relied upon so much, they are secondary sources. Therefore, a historian who wants to genuinely represent the past should rely upon the primary sources, mainly archival sources therefore, and thus write his history. This hierarchization of sources grounded the history on an objectivist basis, meaning thereby that the history written like this truly represent the past, because that is what happened in the past, because it was revealed to us by the people who were present at that point of time. This is the objective history, and historian should rely upon such an account and should aspire towards writing such a history, that is the objective history. How to show that the history is objective? A book which is a person is writing is objective. Rank said that it is better for the historian to introduce the methodology of referencing. What does referencing mean? In day to day terminology of writing history, we mean by referencing that to give footnotes or endnotes. That is, if a historian is saying something, he or she must point out from where this statement comes from, and he or she should clearly mention at the end of the page or at the end of the document, either as footnote or endnote, that what are the sources on the basis of which this statement has been made. Therefore, if I am saying that a person was killed in Calcutta in 1971, it means I have to show, I have to qualify my statement, I have to ground my statement by giving the source from which I have taken this particular information. If I say that Morarji Desai became Prime Minister in this particular year, although it is a well known event and I may not need to give the referencing, the footnote for this, nevertheless, if I quote the newspaper, contemporary newspaper which gives the record how he took oath, who were the ministers in his cabinet, that means I am giving the sources which can be verified by others. So, I am objectifying my statement, it is not my subjective statement, I am not making a statement which is completely subjective to me, but I am giving some references in footnote. Therefore, the method of giving footnote, it puts the history on an objective basis. So, Rank said three things. One is that primary sources should be relied upon most, secondary sources should also be consulted, and third, that while making a statement, a historian should give the sources which can be verified, and that put the history on an objective basis. But it was not only that, it was also something beyond that, and that beyond thing which I am going to point out now is this. When Rank said that the history has to rely upon sources, he put complete faith on the sources. He made the sources not only contemporary with the past, but almost synonymous with the past. So, the sources reveal everything about past, they show how the past was. So, the sources became past. What I mean, that something which was given to us in a selective manner almost took the form of being the complete past, and that tradition continued for a while, and there were people who said, basing on this view of history, that it is possible to write ultimate history. Ultimate history means that after that there is no need for any history writing for a particular period or a particular event or a particular person. So, one can write, they said, it is possible to write ultimate history if we have all the sources with us. So, for example, on the Ashokan period in ancient India, if we have all the records, all of Ashokan inscriptions, some of the literary records, Kautilya Arthashastra and some other things, if we have all these things on our table, it is possible to write a history after which there is no need to write history of the Ashokan period. This is what the assertion was, that if we have all the sources with us, after that there is no need to write history, because after the sources the history writing will be finished. So, the sources acquired a god-like character in two ways. One, that they represented the past completely, and secondly, sources, basing on the sources, on all the sources, whatever the sources are available, if you can base on that and write a history, there was no need to write history after that. Of course, there were many problems, and as people pointed out later, but before people pointed out, there were some other developments. Despite all their attempts, the historians could not exhaust the sources, because there were new methods of unearthing the sources which came out. So, we had more and more archaeological record, we had more and more different kinds of records which the earlier historians had not paid any attention to. For example, earlier history was based mostly on political events, and the history they wrote were political and administrative history, and therefore, they based their histories, their books mostly on such kind of records. Later historians discovered other kinds of records like koans, archaeology, literary text, popular texts, oral sources, oral songs. So, there were variety of sources, and there was revolutionized the history writing. So, the earlier notion about ultimate history was challenged from various quarters. But besides sources, many people pointed out that it is not only the sources, the availability of the sources or multiplicity of the sources which is the problem. The problem was concerned, they said, with the basis of the history writing, because the basis of the history writing are sources, and ultimate sources are the primary sources. But they asked a question, how could these sources be relied upon as representing the past completely? How could a source from the past can be said to be real? What are the methods of verification? Because one is a person who is writing the particular record, giving a particular statement, even if contemporary, about the past. For example, let me illustrate. Ashokan inscription which have come to us for writing the history of Ashokan period. We know that these inscriptions were authorized by Emperor Ashoka himself. So, we base our history basing on a record which the king himself authorized. How far can we believe that whatever these inscriptions are saying are completely true? How can we be critical of the king or emperor basing on these records, because these records obviously were all praises for the emperor. Similarly, for Samudragupta, most of the history, most of our knowledge about Samudragupta comes from Allahabad inscription, which he himself authorized, and a court scholar who praised him completely was the writer, and basing on this record we say that Samudragupta won many battles and he was the Napoleon of India. So, basing mostly on one single inscription which was authorized by the king, we are saying, we are writing history saying that, saying and knowing about Samudragupta as if we know him completely and his period completely, and we know that he fought many battles and won all of them. Of course, there is some problem in these kind of records. So, the sources which come to us, which we call as primary sources, they have a problem. They have a problem of subjectivity. It is not only our subjectivity while writing history which comes into play, it is the subjectivity of the records themselves which we have, because these records were written by people who believed in many things, who wanted the future to believe in things which they believe in. So, obviously, there is a problem in these records. Secondly, at another level, when we are writing history, we are not completely neutral individuals, we are not rotating in space. We are individuals who are grounded in our culture. We are developed, nurtured in a particular way in which the culture plays a major role. That is one thing. Secondly, it is not only culture, we also acquire many ideologies while developing, while reading many things. So, we may be nationalist, we may be liberal, we may be many more things. So, while reading the past records, we see the past, we tend to see the past from our own ideological or cultural framework. Now, this is also a matter of subjectivity, because here in whatever way we can remove ourselves from the subjective bias, however much we try, our entire being is made of these cultural traits. So, we try to see the past in a certain way. Obviously, it is possible for us to develop ourselves to be more and more neutral. Nevertheless, it is not possible to be completely neutral, nor is it desirable. So, our history is grounded in a certain subjectivity. Therefore, these critiques of objectivity said that it is not possible to attain complete objectivity as has been devised by Rank and his followers. There was another critique which developed in the 20th century at another level. This critique put more emphasis on cultural factors. They said that the person from one culture cannot understand the person or the ideas or the beliefs of another culture. So, it is very difficult to represent that another culture, because whenever we are going to describe another culture, for example, if I go to a tribal area and try to study the tribal area, most of the time I see the tribal activities, their behavior, their way of communicating with each other in my own terms, because that is the only language, that is the only way of thinking which is available to us. It is possible to some extent overcome it if I live there among the tribals for few years, understand their language. Even then, I cannot completely understand, cannot completely eliminate my own background, which I have been living for say 30 or 40 years, by living just for a few years in a tribal area. So, the historian tends to see another culture in his or her own cultural terms, and therefore, there is an element of subjectivity, cultural subjectivity involved in that. So, it is not possible to completely, fully, objectively represent another culture. And since past is another culture for us, because people who lived 100 years or 200 years or 500 years ago in history, in the past, they lived differently, they married differently, they dressed differently, and they spoke differently. We do not know their language, we do not follow their language, we follow their language only by second hand, as the language has developed over the 500 years or 1000 years, but we do not know their language first hand. We do not know their metaphors first hand, and language does not mean only the meaning related to words related to objects, but also in its cultural ramifications. We do not know that past completely, it is not possible for us, because it is another culture. Therefore, it is not possible to completely represent the past, to reconstruct the past completely as the objectivist quest was. So, the cultural theorists, they questioned this. So, the history we write is subjective in certain sense, it cannot be fully objective. There were another school which developed in the post Second World War period, particularly in the 1960s and 1970s, which had a different challenge, which posed a different challenge to writing of history and the objectivist principle. This was the linguistic school. They said they relied upon the Swiss linguist Ferdinand Saussure, who wrote in 1916, it was posthumously published book called the General Course in Linguistics. From this book completely revolutionized the theory of linguistics. It changed our perception of how to view the language, the whole linguistic system. Saussure said that the language does not refer to reality. It means that when I am saying a chair, I am not referring to a chair, or when I am saying the table, I am not referring to the table in reality. What I am referring to, Saussure said, when we say chair or table or door or pen, what we are referring to are certain ideas, a concept. They are not things in reality. Pen is a concept, chair is a concept, table is a concept. So, we are referring to a concept, not to a thing in reality, and therefore, the language is a system which is non-referential. It does not refer to thing in reality. What it refers to is another term in the same language. So, when I say red, it means, how do I say red? How do I signify red? By saying red, I mean it is not black, it is not yellow, it is not orange, but it is something different. So, the language is based on this difference. When I say one thing, it means it is not another. When I say mango, it means it is not apple. So, this difference is the foundation of language, and that is what Saussure said. He said that the language does not refer to anything in reality, it refers to another terms in the language, and it is this self referential system on which the system of language is based. It developed slowly, but at least Saussure had meant that one word, for example, a chair refers to one concept of a chair. It was developed later by many other linguists, but the most radical turn was given by Derrida. Derrida said that one term in a language, even in one language, does not refer to one thing, it refers to many things. So, when I say chair, if we see the history of this term, it does not refer to one thing, it has been referring to various things. That means the meaning of a term is not fixed, it is unstable, it is variable. One term can refer to many things. So, if one term can refer to many things, so we base our history on the language, on the text written in the past, without knowing the exact meaning of the terms. So, when we refer to those terms, we try to interpret those terms in our own ways. Nevertheless, what these terms in the past meant may have been completely different. So, our entire quest for achieving objectivity or truth is ill grounded, it is not possible, it is misplaced. So, he said, because the language and the terms in the language is unstable, any linguistic system is unstable. So, it is not possible to write something which can refer to truth, which can reconstruct the past, which can reproduce the reality, which can refer to the reality. The language is a self contained system, and all we can do is to read text and compare it with other texts. It is not possible to know reality at all. The world, although it exists, it may be existing objectively somewhere, nevertheless what we know about the world is through the language, through the text, and not through the real world. So, we cannot know the real world, we can only know the language, we can only know the text. And so, in his famous statement he said that text is everything and everything is text. So, it is a somewhat idealistic view of reality, idealistic view of history, in which Derrida said that it is not possible for a historian to write about past, to know truth, to write objectively about anything. So, objectivity is completely impossible. All we can do is to write text basing on other texts and not basing on reality as such. All these things, all these schools of thought which challenge the notion of objectivity really made a great dent in the writing of history. And we now therefore see the history on a completely new basis. We know, for example, now that it is not possible to write a completely objective history. We know now that it is not possible to exactly reconstruct the past, because one, the sources which have come to us are subjective. Second, because when we write about the past, we bring our own ideological and cultural terminology to that, and therefore, our writing is also subjective. Thirdly, because we belong to a different culture, writing about the past, about the people who belong to different culture from ours, is not comprehending them fully. And thirdly, because the language as a system has certain problems with it, because it is not possible to take the terms which were used in the past similarly as we use it now. Therefore, it is there also a subjective element is there. Then the question comes whether we write history at all or not, whether do any kind of social science or not. And now we have to make certain qualifications in all these idealistic view of subjectivity, which take us away from any kind of objectivity. One thing, all these radical questioning about history said that it is not possible to write history at all because of various factors. Now we know, we concede that complete reconstruction of past is not possible. Nevertheless, the fact that even a partial reconstruction is not possible is questionable. Therefore, we can say that although we cannot completely reconstruct the past, we may partially understand it and partially reconstruct it. Secondly, we know that seeing from human eye, we cannot comprehend the mountain as a whole. Nevertheless, it does not mean that the mountain does not exist, it does exist. And secondly, with developed technical resources, for example, we can use helicopters, we can view a mountain from various sides and try to piece them together. So, basing on all these technical resources, it is possible to construct a picture of the reality in certain way. So, as in the old saying that 4 blind men, they saw the elephant and someone said elephant is like a fan, someone said who touched his elephant's feet say that elephant is like a trunk. They were wrong, of course, elephant was not like a fan, elephant was not like a trunk. Nevertheless, they represented reality in certain senses, because although the elephant is not like a fan or a trunk, the elephant's ear is like a fan, the elephant's feet are like trunks. So, at least they represented the partial reality, and when it could be, everything could be pieced together, we may probably have a picture of the elephant. So, it is possible, basing on collating the knowledge using developed technical resources, it is possible to have a partial understanding of reality. Secondly, when we come to understanding the language itself, when they say that language is not referential, it does not refer to things in reality, then they forget about the origin of the language. How did language originate if it did not refer to anything in reality? It is true that language now, when it is very sophisticated, it is possible that it may be self referential in certain senses. But if we go to the origins of the language, as we see also in the pictorial scripts, that it refers to reality in a certain ways. It tries to draw the lines like the things in reality we see from our own perception. And now we know that basing on this, it is possible to have some objective view of the past and to know some understanding of the reality, thanks